love freely. Now here's what happens. If we aren't free in our love, we become slaves of other people. You care what they think too much, and you try to become the people pleaser and live up to their expectations, or you've got somebody in your life that may be a control freak. And what happens is, if you're with somebody that is hard to say no to, you lose your freedom, and you're always living up to this person's expectations or taking responsibility for their problems. Well, what the Bible says is that we were designed to be free. And it actually goes further and says, don't become a slave to anything. And what we find is that we do get enslaved to other people. If they're control freaks, or sometimes if they're overly needy, it's hard to hold them responsible. If you have someone in your life that's not holding up their end of the relationship, and you've become enslaved to their control or their problems, then what research would say, and what God's secrets would say, is that you've got to regain your freedom and start to say no to people's control. Let me give you another secret. Dealing with negative emotions can actually lead to happy ones. The Bible puts it this way. In Ecclesiastes, Solomon says, get this, a sad face can make a heart happy. Isn't that weird? Well, it's weird until you're a psychiatrist or a psychologist, and you know that somebody with a heavy heart, they're depressed, come in for treatment, and you've got to begin to talk to them about what's hurting them, and they begin to unpack what they're actually troubled about, and the sadness and the grief and the losses and the pain and all of that, and they start to actually express those emotions, then something magic happens. Have you ever noticed where your tear ducts are? Why are your tear ducts in your eyes? You ever thought about that? They're supposed to be there because when we're talking to someone, somebody's supposed to be looking at us. See, they're in your eyes because your pain is supposed to be shared. As opposed to, what if they were under your armpits and you could just use antiperspirant and get rid of your pain? No, your pain is supposed to be processed while somebody understands. And if you do that, it leads to a metamorphosis of losses turning into joy as we express and work through our negative emotions. I remember when I was in training as a psychologist, my first job in a hospital, I went in and I thought psychologists are supposed to make everybody happy. It's exactly the opposite. You go into these groups and they got people to talk about what was hurting them, but then the sad faces made the hearts happy.
Identifying and understanding negative emotions is key to overcoming them. And to pretend that you're over those things or to feel like you're over them is simply a mistake. You're never over them until you can understand them fully and make them a cohesive part of your life story. I'm not suggesting that people have to revivify horrible or traumatic experiences, but they have to own it. They have to make it a narrative of their life that they can understand. In order to feel okay about ourselves moment to moment, there has to be integrated function of the regions of the brain that allows for flexible regulation. And if you don't identify, if you shrink from negative things, now we're losing parts of you. We're losing parts of the brain that remain more primitive in terms of their ability to regulate. There's another way, is to embrace something spiritual, something higher than yourself, something outside of yourself. That gives you two things. A, an omnipotent, empathic force that does appreciate what you're going through, and just that feeling of somebody there or something there appreciating you has a tremendous healing value. And number two, it requires you to let go, to connect to something transcendent. Well, connecting to something higher, a higher power, outside the self, just a concept of faith allows people to let go of that control. They won't do it without faith. I've seen this over again in my clinical practice. I don't fully understand what it is, I don't speak to it well, but I know it's there and I know it's profound.
So actually dealing with what's troubling with you is a research-proven secret that the Bible says that we're actually supposed to talk things through. Then we can get past them and not carry them around. And then the last secret about happiness I want to share with you is this, that a good life doesn't depend on good circumstances. There are people that have yo-yo lives, and if the market is up that day, they're happy. If it goes down, they're depressed. If they get this job, it's good. If they don't, and they're just like this. That's not what research shows, and it's not what the Bible says that stability depends on. Stability depends, first of all, in the security of our relationship with God, knowing that He loves us, and also, remember the monkeys in your cage, that you have good people around you. And then no matter what happens, you're going through life with those secure relationships. Secondly, the Bible says that when you go through hard times, it doesn't have to be all for nothing. And successful people, stable people, when they encounter a trial, they do what the Bible says. It says, consider it all joy when you encounter trials, because there's something we're supposed to learn from that. And here's what you find about stable people. When they're in a difficult situation, not only are they asking, what do I need to do to get out of this? They're also asking, what do I need to learn in this so I don't have to go through this again? And then the last part of this circumstance thing is the Bible says that God's ultimately in control. And it's hard to believe sometimes, but even when we go through the hardest things, if we know that we have a Father who knows the big picture, and this is a scene that He's going to take us through, it's going to have an ending, and we have hope for the future, that's where stability comes, when we're grounded spiritually in that relationship. And we know that, you know what, whenever a door closes, there's a God behind that that opens another door to take us to the next step in our lives.
God oftentimes answers a prayer with silence. He answers a prayer with no. He answers a prayer with darkness. He answers a prayer by letting us know we need to be patient. He answers a prayer through pain and struggle. But those things always end up making us better people. You see, everybody wants Easter, but nobody wants Good Friday. There is no Easter without Good Friday. You have to go through the struggle of Good Friday, of death and suffering, to see the resurrection and to see glory. You cannot have the promised land without sometimes going through the desert. But it requires patience, waiting on God, seeking God, and accepting moments of dryness, moments of doubt, and moments when there is an answer that says, no, not right now, wait.
So stability and happiness come from our relationship with Him and others, and also living out these principles in the way that we think, and the way we process things, and the way that we interpret events go a long way in finding the secret to happiness. Okay, the next area of life that God gives us secrets about how to live is the area of relationships. So we're going to look at a handful now of God's secrets about relationships. Now the first one is not one that we normally think of, because normally when we think of, I'd like to have a good relationship, what do we think about? I've got to find the right kind of person. Right? And there's some truth to that. But if you listen to a lot of people, they think about it always in terms of the other person, and they never get this secret. Good relationships come from having the skills to produce them. I was working with a couple the other day, and one of them was wanting to leave the relationship because she said, well, I just need to find somebody. I want to be with somebody that treats me well. Well, the reality was the guy had done some stuff that wasn't great, but he was getting over it, and he was working with how he was, and he was truly working on becoming a better husband. But from her side of things, she didn't see anything she was contributing to the problem. And she just thought if she could find a better person, then she would have a good relationship. What I said to her was, look, you could leave this relationship, but the things I hear come out of you, the toxicity, the negativity, the inability to forgive, the way you put him down when he fails, you're going to take those patterns into your next relationship, and you're going to end up right here again. I heard a pastor say one time in a sermon that he had a couple in his office, and he said to them, you know, you guys want a 10-level relationship, but the problem is you're both 5s. And see, they didn't realize that they're on a scale of 1 to 10, their ability to have a great relationship was only at a 5 level, and they were angry with each other instead of working on their skills. A lot of times you hear this in people who are, looking for the one, and they go to internet sites and dating services and all that, and you have to find a good person. You have to find the one. But if we're not becoming the one in any relationship we're in by learning the skills that we need in order to make it work, then that a relationship and the good relationships are going to elude us. Secret number 2, you attract relationships that fit you. You attract relationships that fit you. Now the secret